Well, good day, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. Well, I've been a do-it-yourselfer for quite a few years. I've enjoyed making things like cameras and tripods because I just like the whole process of doing it yourself, and I like the outcome and the idea of, hey, I did it myself. It may not be quite as good as a commercially made product, but I can say I did it myself, and it's kind of interesting, the whole design process and all that. I've built a few full-size tripods out of wood, and more recently, though, I've been interested in tabletop tripods and camera supports. How easy is it to build one of these? I have a couple different ideas and projects here, so let's talk about do-it-yourself tabletop tripods. Stay tuned. What's interested me is really about how can you make a design that involves the kind of parts you can easily find at a hardware store? That's a great question, right? The problem with hardware store parts is most everything is built square, orthographic, 90-degree corners, right? Pieces of wood, sticks. My goal is really to be able to piece together, cobble together these kind of homemade designs with minimal kinds of woodworking or machining, and making it more accessible to people that don't have a full machine shop. You just have a few simple hand tools, go buy some parts at the hardware store, cut a few pieces, glue them and screw them together and make something that's functional. I've gone through quite a few designs, and I guess we could talk about a couple of these here. This here isn't really a tripod, more like a monopod with a base. The base is made of 5/8 inch square poplar. These are the kind of sticks you can find at the big box hardware stores here in the United States, and they're pretty much finish grade. You buy them in 3 or 4 foot lengths or whatever. So I have a couple pieces here, and they're simply screwed and glued together, and then I put some metal angle brackets on the two inside corners just to stabilize them. And I have some simple little rubber feet that screw into the bottom to make a 3-point support. The vertical part of it is a 1/2 inch oak dowel. It's recessed in there, and it's secured in place with a screw that's countersunk, and there's a little glue in there to hold it together more tightly. Now, the head of the tripod is really simple. It's a scrap of wood. There's a 1/2 inch hole drilled in it. The oak dowel goes into that block, and there is a wooden pin pushed in there, glued, and then it cut off and sanded. And then adjacent to that, where the rod comes into the head, is a hole drilled, and that is for the tripod head itself. Now, what I'm using is an inexpensive ball head, little cheap little kind of ball heads that you can get commercially available, and then you can screw the ball head onto it with a 1/4-20 screw nut like that, and then you have a tripod support for your camera, tabletop support for your camera. Now, there are some limitations to this design. First of all, you can't change the height that the camera is going to sit at. Any articulating of the camera is going to have to be through the ball head that you use on top. So you're just going to have to get a commercially made little ball head fitted on top there. So it's a cute little tripod, very small, lightweight. It only weighs a few ounces, right? It puts the camera at a certain height. Now, at a certain point in time, I really wanted a bigger version, and so I went and just made a larger version. So these are 7/8 poplar sticks, again some rubber feet, a larger inch diameter wooden dowel. Again, I'm using like this knob here as a 1/4-20 bolt, and then you can put a ball head on top of it of your choice, whatever kind of ball head you like that. And there you go, you have an adjustable ball head tabletop camera support. Again, a little bit taller than this one, and it doesn't really take up too badly of a footprint. And this one is a little bit different. This one was an attempt to make a different way to articulate 3 round dowels to make them into a triangular tripod base using really simple materials, just machine screws, without having a fancy machined head. And the way this works, it is rather unorthodox, I will admit. So the camera head is, again, a piece of scrap plywood, and there is a 1/4-20 blind nut mounted, recessed into that base, so there is a 1/4-20 hole here for a threaded bolt to mount a camera. There is this little piece of 1/4 inch oak that sticks down from the piece of plywood as a vertical piece, and then there's a common bolt going through that, and it supports 2 of the 3 legs, and they sort of come out in either direction like that. And then the third tripod leg is bolted through one of the first 2 legs at 90 degrees to it. The key to the design of this is that I have 3 little screw eyes mounted on the inside of each leg, and I have a common loop of some string, like a hemp type of string. I don't like nylon string because it slips too much, or the knots come undone. But the idea here is you pull the legs tight until the string stretches tight, right, on the table. And the more weight that you put down on the support, the tighter the string gets, which is a really interesting idea. You might notice immediately about this particular design is that the head of the camera is crooked, right? Well, that is a feature, not a problem, because what you do is you use a ball head and you mount the ball head, and as you can see now, you can have, by adjusting the ball head, you can make the camera horizontal, right? So a really simple way to make a 3-legged tripod using simple material, simple 90-degree cuts, just a simple kind of scrap wood you buy at a hardware store. You got to be able to drill some holes through some round dowels, put some bolts in. These are nylon locking nuts and probably 1024 machine screws, a 1/4 blind nut, a couple pieces of wood, some string, some screw eyes. It's really simple. Again, this thing weighs only a couple ounces. Very lightweight and very strong for its weight. Oh yeah, I also put on some rubber knobs, like furniture feet, on the bottom of the legs, so if it's on a smooth surface, they're not going to slip. Now, one of the things that inspired me to make this kind of tripod, where I have a tension string strengthening the framework, so you have like compression members that take compressive loads, and then you have tension members that take tensile or tensile stress loads, and together it forms what Buckminster Fuller called a tensegrity structure. And there's some interesting books I have in my library. An Introduction to Tensegrity. Tensegrity are these structures that combine rigid members that take compressive loads with tensile members that take tensile loads. And this is an example of a tensegrity tripod, very strong and lightweight. And oh, by the way, if you ever get the book Synergetics by R. Buckminster Fuller, this is rather dense. So years ago, I got one of these. This is an UltraPod 2. And the primary feature of the UltraPod 2 is it has 3 legs, of course. It's a tripod. The main leg is a 90-degree L shape cross-section, and riveted to it are 2 smaller legs that fold open 90 degrees, and it forms a triangular, equilateral triangular base. And then attached to the back edge of the main L-shaped leg is this little tongue that sticks up, and attached to that tongue is a little clamping mechanism with a 1/4 mount here. And it is adjustable as a ball head on its own. It has a certain amount of range of motion, but I usually put my Joby GorillaPod ball head on top of it that raises the camera a little bit higher up and gives me a more range of motion. And this kind of a setup, if you hold it in your hand with the main L-channel leg, you can use it as a vlogging camera, right? Handheld, pointing back at you, and then you can just set it down somewhere, and it makes a really handy support. I was really interested in the idea that, again, 90-degree L-channel components, legs that fold out to 90 degrees, which is the common angles you find in hardware store, pieces of wood and all that, making an equilateral triangle base. And I thought, oh, that's kind of an elegant solution. So the L channel part of the leg on my design is a large 7/8 inch poplar square stick, and up here near the top are 2 1/4-inch thick by 1.5 inch wide oak pieces, this piece here and that piece there. They screw and glue into the 2 sides of the main leg to form that L channel up here. And then I have 2 secondary legs that fold out. They're bolted with machine screws and nylock nuts, and they fold out And there are little stopper blocks here that keep them from going any further out than 90 degrees, right? So that one there, this one here, forms an equilateral triangular base. I have some rubber furniture feet caps on the bottom, and then I have the little fin, if you want to call it that. So at the top of the main leg, I have a bracket of wood. It's kind of fork-shaped, and there's a 1/4 inch tongue of oak that sticks up. And on that tongue is this homemade ball head. These are 1/4 20 knobs with 1/4 20 bolts. These are 1/4 20 round knobs. There's some hardware in there, and there's these 2 pieces of wood that clamp around this 1/4 20 wooden tongue. And then this ball itself is a 1.5 inch wooden ball with a hole already drilled through it that you can find at the like craft stores. They have these wooden little parts, and there's a bolt going through a 1/4 20 bolt with some hardware making a support for your camera right there. And so with 2 adjustable balls here, you can totally loosen them all, and it becomes, you can change the angle of the support head, so you can tighten the lower ball and make that angle rigid vertically, and then you can adjust the upper one and tighten the upper part, and that tightens this. And you can also do things like you could tilt this slightly this way, and then you could tilt your camera back that way. If you were kind of shooting down that way with a heavy lens, you could move the center of gravity a little bit over and make it more stable. So you have a lot of flexibility with this kind of a head, but it's kind of fun making my own ball head. Oh yeah, the way the ball works is I have these holes drilled in the side of these support pieces that the ball engages, and so the inside rim of these holes are squeezing on the ball and tightening it up. So that's homemade ball head in the spirit of the Ultrapod 2, but of course it's a taller tripod. I'm still interested in, can I come up with another design of tripod? Can I come up with a tripod that's maybe easier to make for a typical person out there that doesn't have access to a full machine shop or woodworking shop? And so, yeah, I have another idea for another tabletop tripod. So this is an idea that I sketched on 15 July 2020. So a square piece of wood, something like that, and some of these 90-degree aluminum angle channels, maybe 1/2 inch, and you could cut the flange off toward the end of each of the metal channels, drill a hole, and then these will pivot. And this is the top view looking down, or the bottom view looking up and showing the legs closed. They each have a screw holding them in place like that. So that was one idea for a set of legs. And then it kind of morphed into this idea using a short piece of square wood like this and using a common bolt that goes through to hold 2 of the 3 legs, and kind of a configuration like this. And then the 3rd leg would be coming off the side of the block of wood like that, and you'd have to have a pivoting kind of a bracket to hold the actual camera there. So then that morphed into the idea that if you take a square piece of wood, and if you cut it at a 22-degree angle and then you rotate it around, you get basically, well, let me show you here, like this. So you cut a 22.5-degree angle, you flip that piece around, and now with this piece at 45 degrees, this piece is vertical like that. And so this is more closer to what I'm building now. A common bolt for 2 of the legs here, and then the 3rd one is up here. And then digging around now in my bin of miscellaneous hardware, I came upon this little angle bracket like this, and I also came upon a little tripod thumb screw that has the little plastic washer that holds it in place, and it's a very short thumb screw like that. So what I've done here is I've marked a place where this goes like that, and one of the legs, one of the 3 legs, is going to be screwed into the common with a common bolt like that, and then the other 2 legs are going to be attached here on this thing with a common bolt also. So I'm about ready to put this together. I've already drilled and tapped these holes. I'm using some 832 machine screws, and I have some 832 wing nuts and whatnot, so I'm going to try to put all this together now. Okay, I've got these knots pretty well set and double, triple knotted. I'm going to put a little bit of high temperature hot glue, I should say, on each knot and try to keep them from coming loose. Well, okay, so here we are on the tripod. It's a little, maybe a little wobbly, but I think for handheld use, for video shooting, it looks like it's just about dead even with eye level, which is kind of what I wanted. I think that looks pretty good, huh? Kind of eye level, yeah. Well, okay, here's the new tripod with a Joby Gorilla Pod ball head mounted on it. Folded down, so yeah, it meets the requirements. One of the requirements we wanted was to be collapsible, and it's pretty easy to deploy. The third leg, you want to make sure the wing nut on it is loosened a little bit so you can pull it out like that away from the other two legs, tighten up that hardware a little bit. And then the first two legs, they're going to simply open up either side like that, and you basically will open them up until the string that connects them is tight, and then you take the main central part of the head and adjust it so it's even and not tilted left or right. With that string tight and those two, you can tighten this guy up like that, okay? And then the third leg, you pull it out until the other two strings here and here are tight, right? And then you can tighten up that second wing nut. And then you have a Tensegrity tripod, right? Compression members, tension members. The wood flexes, you can see that leg flexing, right? But it remains rigid, which is kind of one of the keys there. So, yeah, this thing, even with the Joby Gorilla Pod ball head on it, it's pretty lightweight tripod. 85 grams, which is 3 ounces. I think it meets the requirements of something that you could easily do at home if you have simple hand tools, saw and a drill, basically. Cutting the 22.5 degree angle on the main body, you need a protractor and a little T-square to make a straight line and a little miter box to cut these things if you don't have any power tools. You can certainly do this by hand. When I went to the hardware store, I was originally hoping to find those little wooden painting stir sticks. You know how some of the hardware stores or paint stores used to give you stir sticks when you order paint, and I figured, oh, I'll buy a couple little 50-cent whatever stir sticks. Well, they didn't have them where I went, so I had to buy a yardstick, a cheap little true value hardware store yardstick. And the story is I was riding my motor scooter over to the hardware store, and so I had to buy a couple little items. And the yardstick, of course, is too big to put underneath the seat of my scooter. And then I said, well, let's see. I could straddle it across the handlebars of the scooter, but then when I go to brake or whatever, I might drop it. So I ended up sticking it down my shirt. Anyways, the things you do when you're riding a scooter. Anyways, so the difference between the tensile strings on this tripod versus the tensile strings on this tripod here is, on this one, it's one continuous loop of string, and you can alter the angle of the legs. As long as the string is tightly stressed or stretched out, it'll be tight. But on this particular model, each string is a separate piece, and so it's not one loop. And I wanted to do that on purpose to make sure that the legs retained their equilateral status here, and you have a triangular stance for the tripod. So one of the things I've done is I've made sure I put lock nuts on both sides of the machine screw, on both the wing nut side and the head of the screw, so you can adequately tighten the hardware so it does get tight and you don't need a screwdriver. Well, so here are the 3 tabletop tripods that are collapsible. These 2 use tensegrity tensioning threads or strings. These 2 use a commercially made ball head that you attach to the top of the tripod, whereas this one is a homemade functioning ball head. This is probably the best made of all 3 of these. The reason why I don't actually use it that much right now is because all of my cameras use the Joby GorillaPod mounting plate. I need to get me another Joby GorillaPod ball head on here, but it kind of makes it redundant if I do that, right? Because it already has a ball head, so I just don't use this as much. It's made really nicely. It's an interesting design, but I do think if I was going to modify this tripod to make it more useful for the way I use my camera gear now, is I would take off this homemade ball head, and on this fin piece in the middle, I would just mount a block that has a vertical surface, or I should say a horizontal surface right here, right? So that enables me to mount my ball head. I would just make it so there's a 1/4-20 bolt coming up, and I can put a Joby GorillaPod or another kind of a ball head on it. It would, make it a little bit lower, wouldn't be as tall, or I could extend it up higher a little bit, but still have a bolt on it just to put a ball head like this. And so what I don't want to have is like a homemade ball head, commercial ball head on top of it. Now you got too much articulation going on, and it's possible it would get really too wobbly and it wouldn't stay tight or rigid. So this one I don't use that much because of this crooked head design. It's just a little funky. It's a curiosity. It was a project I wanted to build. This is the new one, and I've already used it. In fact, today I was over at my friend Kevin's house. We were shooting some video for an upcoming typewriter video. He's replacing the Platen on a Remington Portable, and so that was fun. But I brought this along, and it was a nice way to try it out and see how it works, and it works pretty good. So these projects have kind of migrated from being curiosities and like just how would you make it? You know, it's like a DIY project. Can I make something like that? How simple can I make it? How easy is it to do? More into a practical project that is easy to make, and anybody can make this. You don't need power tools. You need just a hand drill, really, and a miter box and a saw, some glue, maybe a clamp or 2, and some hardware. It's easy to do. Some drill bits. These are fun to make, and I encourage you guys to think about making something like that. Again, DIY is fun to do. Something to do if you're stuck at home during the current crisis that we have in the world today. Maybe this might be something you might want to try. It's a lot of fun doing these. A lot of satisfaction. You know, it's not as good as a commercially made tripod in a lot of ways, but it's really interesting to see, can I come up with a design that is different, and it still is, like in this case, really strong because of the tensegrity structure, and lightweight and made from simple materials. It's just the challenge of it I enjoy, and I think you'll enjoy it too. It's creativity, and that's what I think we all should be doing, is staying creative. Yes, do that, please. Hey, I'd like to hear from you. Drop a note or 2 down below if you can, and let's have a dialogue about homemade tripods. Okay, until next time, guys, you stay well. Have yourselves a great day. Bye-bye.